In the bustling corridors of a modern office building, Sarah noticed something that would change her perspective forever. As she walked past the break room, she observed her colleague Michael sitting alone, staring into his coffee cup with an expression she had never seen before. Most people hurried past, absorbed in their own concerns, but something made Sarah pause. In that moment of genuine attention, she recognized the weight of unspoken struggle in Michael's posture, the subtle signs of someone carrying a burden too heavy to share. This scene represents the fundamental choice we all face daily, whether to move through life focused solely on our own experiences or to develop the profound human capacity for emotional intelligence and empathy. The difference between these approaches shapes not only our relationships, but the very quality of our existence. Emotional intelligence, first popularized by psychologist Daniel Goleman, encompasses far more than simply recognizing emotions. It represents a sophisticated understanding of the emotional landscape that exists within ourselves and others, combined with the ability to navigate this terrain with wisdom and skill. True emotional intelligence begins with self-awareness but extends into the realm of genuine care for others' well-being. The foundation of emotional intelligence rests upon what researchers call interoception, the ability to sense our internal physiological signals. When Sarah noticed the tension in her shoulders during a difficult conversation, or the way her breathing changed when she felt anxious, she was practicing this fundamental skill. Our bodies constantly communicate emotional information through subtle physical sensations, changes in posture, fluctuations in energy, and variations in breathing patterns. Many people live disconnected from these internal signals, moving through their days like pilots flying without instruments. They experience emotions as overwhelming forces that seem to arise from nowhere, rather than as valuable information about their inner state and external circumstances. Developing this awareness requires patience and practice, much like learning to distinguish between different musical notes or flavors in wine. The practice begins with simple observation. Throughout the day, we can pause to notice physical sensations without immediately trying to change or judge them. When frustration arises during a traffic jam, instead of automatically reacting, we might notice the tightness in our chest, the clenching of our jaw, or the way our hands grip the steering wheel. This awareness creates space between stimulus and response, allowing for more thoughtful choices about how to proceed. Emotional granularity. The ability to distinguish between subtle emotional states represents another crucial aspect of self-awareness. Rather than experiencing only broad categories like good or bad, emotionally intelligent individuals can identify specific feelings such as disappointment versus sadness, or enthusiasm versus nervous excitement. This precision in emotional vocabulary provides greater clarity about our internal experience and more targeted strategies for response. Research conducted by psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett demonstrates that people with higher emotional granularity show greater emotional granulation and psychological resilience when we can accurately identify that we feel overwhelmed and unsupported rather than simply stressed. We can address the specific elements contributing to our state. This might involve seeking help with workload or having a conversation about feeling underappreciated. The development of emotional intelligence requires honest self-reflection about our emotional patterns and triggers. Sarah discovered that her tendency toward people-pleasing often masked underlying resentment when others failed to reciprocate her efforts. By recognizing this pattern, she could address situations more directly, rather than accumulating unexpressed frustration that eventually erupted in unexpected ways. Self-regulation, the second pillar of emotional intelligence, involves managing our emotional responses in ways that serve our long-term well-being in relationships. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist, but rather developing the capacity to experience feelings fully while choosing our responses consciously. The neuroscience behind emotional regulation reveals fascinating insights about how our brains process emotional information. The amygdala, our brain's alarm system, can trigger fight or flight responses before our prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thinking, has time to evaluate the situation. Understanding this physiological reality helps explain why we sometimes react in ways that seem irrational in retrospect. Effective emotional regulation techniques work by strengthening the connection between our emotional and rational brain centers. Deep breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, creating physiological calm that supports clearer thinking. Mindfulness meditation develops the observer self that can witness emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Cognitive reframing helps us examine the thoughts and interpretations that fuel emotional reactions. Sarah learned that her immediate anger when receiving critical feedback often stemmed from interpreting criticism as personal rejection. By developing the ability to pause and consider alternative interpretations, that feedback might reflect genuine care for her development or concern about project outcomes, she could respond more constructively. This shift transformed potentially defensive interactions into opportunities for growth and deeper connection. The practice of emotional regulation also involves developing tolerance for difficult emotions. Our culture often promotes the idea that negative emotions should be avoided or quickly fixed, but emotional intelligence recognizes that all emotions carry valuable information. Sadness signals loss that needs grieving. Anger often indicates boundary violations that require addressing. Fear alerts us to potential threats that may need attention. Learning to sit with difficult emotions without immediately trying to escape them through distraction, substances, or compulsive behaviors requires courage and patience. This tolerance develops gradually through practice, much like building physical strength through regular exercise. Each time we choose to stay present with discomfort rather than fleeing, we expand our emotional capacity. Motivation in the context of emotional intelligence refers to the ability to harness emotions in service of our deeper values and long-term goals. This involves understanding what truly matters to us beneath surface-level desires and developing the persistence to pursue meaningful objectives even when faced with obstacles or setbacks. Intrinsic motivation, drive that comes from internal satisfaction rather than external rewards, proves more sustainable and fulfilling than motivation based purely on others' approval or material gains. Sarah discovered that her most satisfying work projects were those aligned with her core value of helping others develop their potential, regardless of whether they brought immediate recognition or financial reward. Developing authentic motivation requires honest examination of our values and priorities. Many people pursue goals inherited from family expectations, societal pressure, or comparison with others, without questioning whether these objectives align with their genuine desires and strengths. This misalignment often leads to achievement that feels hollow, or success that brings little satisfaction. The process of clarifying personal values involves reflecting on moments when we felt most alive and authentic. What activities energize rather than drain us? What types of contributions make us feel genuinely useful? When do we lose track of time because we're so engaged in what we're doing? These experiences provide clues about our authentic motivations and natural strengths. Emotional intelligence also involves developing resilience in the face of setbacks and challenges. This doesn't mean becoming hardened or insensitive, but rather cultivating the ability to recover from difficulties while maintaining openness to connection and growth. Resilient individuals view failures as learning opportunities rather than evidence of personal inadequacy. Sarah's journey toward greater resilience began when a major project she had led failed to meet its objectives. Initially, she experienced shame and self-criticism that made her want to hide from colleagues and avoid taking on similar challenges. Through developing greater emotional intelligence, she learned to separate the failure of the project from her worth as a person and to extract valuable lessons that improved her future performance. The transition from self-focused emotional intelligence to genuine empathy represents a profound shift in perspective. While self-awareness and regulation provide the foundation, empathy requires extending these capacities to understand and care about others' emotional experiences. This extension happens naturally when we develop sufficient internal stability to venture beyond our own concerns. Empathy involves two primary components: cognitive empathy, the ability to understand others' perspectives intellectually, and effective empathy, the capacity to feel with others emotionally. Both elements contribute to genuine connection, though they operate through different mechanisms and can be developed through different practices. Cognitive empathy develops through curious inquiry about others' experiences and perspectives. Instead of assuming we understand why someone acted in a particular way, we can ask questions that reveal their underlying motivations, concerns, and constraints. Sarah discovered that her colleague Michael's recent irritability stemmed not from personal hostility, but from worry about his mother's declining health and the stress of managing care arrangements while maintaining work responsibilities. This understanding didn't excuse problematic behavior, but it provided context that allowed for more compassionate and effective responses. Rather than taking Michael's curtness personally or responding with matching irritation, Sarah could offer support and understanding while also maintaining appropriate boundaries about professional interaction. Developing cognitive empathy requires releasing our tendency to interpret others' behavior primarily through the lens of how it affects us. When someone cancels plans at the last minute, Our initial response might focus on our disappointment or inconvenience. Cognitive empathy invites us to consider what circumstances might have led to their decision and what they might be experiencing as a result. This perspective-taking ability improves through practice and exposure to diverse experiences and viewpoints. Reading literature, engaging with people from different backgrounds, and traveling to unfamiliar places all expand our capacity to understand varied ways of experiencing the world. Even simple practices like imagining the life circumstances of strangers we encounter throughout the day can strengthen this mental muscle. Effective empathy, the ability to feel with others, operates through different mechanisms and requires careful development to remain beneficial rather than overwhelming. Mirror neurons in our brains automatically activate when we observe others' emotions, creating a natural tendency to experience echoes of others' feelings. This biological empathy can provide valuable information about others' states, but it can also lead to emotional overwhelm if not properly regulated. Sarah learned to distinguish between feeling with others in ways that increased understanding and connection, versus absorbing others' emotions in ways that compromised her own well-being. When her friend expressed deep sadness about a relationship ending, Sarah could feel moved by her friend's pain without becoming equally devastated herself. This emotional attunement allowed her to provide genuine comfort and support from a place of strength rather than shared dysfunction. The development of healthy affective empathy requires maintaining what researchers call self-other distinction, the ability to recognize which emotions belong to us and which belong to others. This skill proves particularly important for people who work in helping professions or who naturally tend toward emotional sensitivity. Practical techniques for developing this distinction include regular check-ins with our emotional state before and after interactions with others, visualization exercises that imagine protective barriers around our emotional space, and grounding practices that reconnect us with our own physical sensations and present moment experience. Compassionate empathy represents the integration of cognitive and affective empathy with wise action. This involves not only understanding and feeling with others, but also responding in ways that genuinely serve their well-being. Sometimes compassionate action involves offering comfort and support. Other times it requires setting boundaries or providing difficult feedback that promotes growth. Sarah's understanding of compassionate empathy deepened when she realized that her habitual people-pleasing often prevented others from experiencing the natural consequences of their choices. By always accommodating her friend's chronic lateness, she was enabling behavior that created problems in other relationships. True compassion sometimes requires allowing others to experience discomfort that motivates positive change. This discernment between helpful and harmful responses requires wisdom that develops over time through experience and reflection. It involves considering not only immediate comfort but long-term well-being, not only individual needs, but broader relationship dynamics and community effects. The practice of empathy also requires recognizing its limitations and potential distortions. Our ability to understand others is inevitably filtered through our own experiences, assumptions, and biases. We may project our own motivations onto others or interpret their behavior through cultural lenses that don't apply to their situation. Intellectual humility about the limits of our understanding helps prevent the arrogance that can masquerade as empathy. When we assume we know exactly what others are feeling or what they need, we may inadvertently impose our own agenda while believing we're being helpful. True empathy involves holding our interpretations lightly and remaining open to correction and new information. The social skills component of emotional intelligence involves applying our emotional awareness and empathy in ways that build positive relationships and contribute to group well-being. This encompasses communication skills, conflict resolution abilities, leadership capacities, and the ability to create environments where others feel valued and understood. Effective communication begins with genuine listening, the ability to receive others' communications without immediately formulating our response or defense. This type of listening requires suspending our agenda temporarily to fully understand what others are attempting to convey. Sarah discovered that many of her workplace conflicts arose from misunderstandings that could have been prevented through more careful attention to others' actual messages rather than her assumptions about their intentions. Active listening involves reflecting back what we hear to ensure accuracy, asking clarifying questions when meaning is unclear, and paying attention to non-verbal communication that may contradict or supplement spoken words. It also requires managing our own emotional reactions when we hear things that trigger defensiveness or disagreement, creating space to understand before moving to response. The ability to express ourselves clearly and authentically represents another crucial social skill. This involves articulating our thoughts, feelings, and needs in ways that others can understand without overwhelming them or creating unnecessary defensiveness. Assertive communication occupies the middle ground between aggressive expression that steamrolls others and passive communication that fails to convey important information. Sarah learned that her tendency to hint at problems rather than addressing them directly often created confusion and resentment. When she felt overwhelmed by her workload, dropping subtle comments about being super busy was less effective than clearly requesting help or discussing priority adjustments with her supervisor. Direct communication, delivered with appropriate sensitivity to timing and context, usually produced better outcomes for everyone involved. Conflict resolution represents one of the most challenging applications of emotional intelligence. When tensions arise between people, emotional reactivity often escalates into destructive patterns that damage relationships and prevent productive problem solving. Emotionally intelligent conflict resolution involves de-escalating emotional intensity while addressing underlying issues constructively. This process begins with self-regulation, managing our own emotional state sufficiently to think clearly and respond thoughtfully, rather than reactively. When we feel attacked or misunderstood, our natural tendency is to defend ourselves or counterattack, but these responses often perpetuate conflict rather than resolving it. Effective conflict resolution also requires empathy for all parties involved, including ourselves. This means acknowledging the legitimate concerns and feelings on different sides of a dispute while working towards solutions that address underlying needs rather than just stated positions. Sarah learned that workplace conflicts often arose from competing priorities or resource constraints rather than personal animosity, allowing for more creative problem-solving approaches. The development of leadership skills through emotional intelligence involves creating environments where others feel safe to contribute authentically and develop their own capacities. This type of leadership operates through influence and inspiration rather than force or manipulation, drawing others toward shared goals through genuine care for their well-being and development. Emotionally intelligent leaders understand that their emotional state significantly impacts their team's dynamics and performance. When leaders consistently model emotional regulation, empathy, and effective communication, they create permission for others to operate from these same capacities. Conversely, leaders who regularly display emotional volatility, lack of empathy, or poor communication skills create environments where others feel compelled to adopt defensive or reactive patterns. Sarah's growth as an informal leader in her organization began when she started noticing and acknowledging others' contributions more explicitly. Rather than assuming people knew their work was valued, she made efforts to express specific appreciation for colleagues' efforts and insights. This attention to others' need for recognition and belonging created stronger team cohesion and motivated higher performance. The practice of emotional intelligence in group settings also involves reading and responding to group emotional dynamics. Teams and organizations develop collective emotional states that influence decision-making, creativity, and productivity. Emotionally intelligent individuals can sense when group energy is flagging, when underlying tensions are affecting collaboration, or when excitement and momentum are building. Responding effectively to group dynamics requires many of the same skills used in individual relationships: awareness, empathy, and skillful action, but applied to the more complex field of multiple people interacting simultaneously. This might involve suggesting a break when group energy is depleting, addressing unspoken tensions that are inhibiting honest communication, or channeling group enthusiasm toward productive action. The cultivation of emotional intelligence and empathy represents a lifelong journey rather than a destination to be reached. Our capacity for emotional awareness, regulation, and connection with others continues to deepen through ongoing practice and experience. Each challenging relationship, difficult emotion, or complex social situation provides opportunities for further development. Sarah's transformation from someone primarily focused on managing her own emotional reactions to someone capable of creating positive emotional environments for others didn't happen overnight. It required consistent practice, willingness to learn from mistakes, and gradual expansion of her comfort zone in emotional territory. The benefits of this development extend far beyond improved relationships, though these improvements are often the most immediately noticeable. Emotional intelligence contributes to better physical health through reduced stress and improved social support. It enhances professional effectiveness through better communication, leadership, and team collaboration. It increases personal satisfaction through alignment between actions and values, and the fulfillment that comes from meaningful connection with others. Perhaps most importantly, developing emotional intelligence and empathy contributes to a more compassionate and understanding world. Each person who develops these capacities creates ripple effects that extend into their families, workplaces, and communities. Children observe emotionally intelligent adults and internalize models for their own emotional development. Colleagues experience more supportive and productive work environments. Communities benefit from members who can bridge differences and work collaboratively toward shared goals. The path forward involves commitment to ongoing growth rather than perfection. Emotional intelligence isn't about never experiencing difficult emotions or always knowing the right thing to say. It's about developing the capacity to navigate emotional territory with increasing skill and wisdom, learning from our mistakes, and maintaining dedication to understanding and caring for ourselves and others. Regular practices that support this development might include daily check-ins with our emotional state, mindfulness meditation to develop present-moment awareness, journaling to process experiences and insights, seeking feedback from trusted others about our emotional impact, and actively practicing perspective-taking in our daily interactions. Reading literature, engaging with diverse communities, and exposing ourselves to experiences that challenge our assumptions all contribute to expanding our emotional and empathetic capacities. Professional development through therapy, coaching, or structured emotional intelligence training can accelerate growth and provide support for navigating particularly challenging emotional terrain. The integration of emotional intelligence and empathy into our daily lives ultimately transforms not only how we relate to others but how we experience ourselves. Instead of being at the mercy of our emotional reactions, we develop the capacity to use emotions as valuable information while maintaining agency over our responses. Instead of feeling isolated in our own experience, we discover the profound satisfaction of genuine connection with others. As Sarah looked back on her journey from that moment in the break room when she first truly noticed Michael's distress, she recognized that developing emotional intelligence had given her something precious: the ability to live with her heart open to the full spectrum of human experience while maintaining the strength and wisdom to respond constructively to whatever she encountered. The world needs individuals capable of this type of emotional wisdom and compassionate action. In a time when division, misunderstanding, and reactive communication dominate much of our public discourse, people who can bridge differences through genuine understanding and empathy provide hope for more constructive ways of being together. The invitation extends to each of us to develop the courage to feel deeply, the wisdom to understand clearly, and the skill to respond with both strength and compassion to the beautiful, complex, challenging experience of being human in relationship with other humans. Through this development, we not only transform our own lives, but contribute to the healing and wholeness that our world desperately needs. The journey continues with each interaction, each choice to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively, each moment of genuine presence with another person's experience, and each opportunity to extend understanding across the apparent barriers that separate us. In this way, emotional intelligence and empathy become not just personal skills, but acts of service to the larger human community of which we are all part. Claude is I and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.